All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining this new episode of Campfire. Usually, you have the number right here on my screen, but I don't recall. Maybe it's like 54, 55 Campfire, I think. So, way above.
Wow,
Yeah, it's been a year and a half now. It's pretty cool.
that's awesome.
And with me, I have the one and only Chryssa Jones. Krissa,
Hey,
thank
folks.
you so much for joining. This is your second time on the show, actually.
Yeah, it is.
And last time we were talking about Google and what we were doing with Google. But this time we're going to talk a little bit more about you and especially how you've really unlocked, I guess, a career in tech through joining and contributing to local and global, actually, technical communities. And we have
And
Drew
Google.
here. Hey, Drew, thanks for being here. Thanks for the support.
Hey, Drew.
Um, and we have we have CWF 4774 joining us. Hello. So we're going to talk about the really how important it is to join tech communities, especially if you're a job seeker, what that can unlock. And Krissa, you're going to walk us through your own experience doing that and how you really went from really the world of education to the world of tech and back to the world of education and tech. And we have Candice here joining us as well. This is awesome. Oh, lots of people here.
Nice.
Aaron joining. Thank you for joining. Mark Curtis from the UK. All
Good
right.
evening, Curtis.
So, for those of you who are joining, Mel is here as well. Mel is one of our instructors.
Hey,
For
Mel.
those of you really thinking about joining the tech world, we're really going to hammer down on the importance of networking and joining communities. All right, but with that said, Krissa, could you introduce yourself first? I think you have to tell us where you're joining from, uh,
Sure.
and
I
maybe
am.
like show your yeah. There you go. Can you see it? No, you have to turn your head. No,
Yeah,
there you go.
there we
There you
go.
go. Yeah, we can see it. And then tell us a little bit about your journey into tech.
Sure. So I am joining the stream today from my hometown of Laie, Oahu, which is on the north shore of the island of Oahu in Hawaii, of course. And I am Native Hawaiian, so this is my ancestral home. And I'm really excited to be able to have an opportunity to be involved with the tech community and to work with you folks at Nucamp. But Ludo, I think I need to dial it back. I'm gonna tell my story all the way back, and I'll try not to make it too long because
There you
my
go. Go for it.
story, it's I didn't have a typical path, and it kind of makes an interesting story to talk about how I got started in tech and where I went in my life journey and kind of what brought me back to where I am today. So um, my first experience with computers actually goes back to when I was maybe 5 or 6 years old. And this would be like the early days of computing. My first computer I used was actually a PD11, a PDP-11 mini computer with the old tape drive. So that was the first computer I ever got a
Wow.
chance to use. Again, I was a kid. This was in the mid to late 70s. I just dated myself. Now you all know who I
How did you get in front of that kind of computer at your age? Like that wasn't in your living room, was it?
No, it wasn't. No, my dad, it was in my dad's office. He actually um anyway, it was in my dad's office and he had a little game on the computer. So when I went to visit dad at work, then that was the game that I got to play was on this computer. So my family's computer, or the first computer we had as a family, was actually a Radio Shack Trash 80, TRS 80.
Ooh.
For folks that might remember that computer back in those days, it had a cassette tape drive, and then we upgraded eventually to a 5 1/4 floppy. That was a big change going from cassette tapes to floppy. So and that computer ran on BASIC, the programming language called BASIC. And back in those days, the only way to program your computer, at least the only way I knew of to program the computer, was to actually write the code into the computer. You couldn't download anything, that didn't exist back then. And you could insert floppy disks, but if you wanted to create your own program, you needed to write the code yourself. So I actually learned how to code. I've seen Commodore 64s, Apple II. I did Apple II also, but that came later. Um, my dad used to subscribe to computer magazines, and in the back
Yes.
of the magazines was actual code that you would copy, like read it and type it out. That's how we copied back then.
Oh, that was really, they had like weekly or monthly code printout.
Yes, and it would be
That's
several
funky.
pages in the back of the magazine, and sometimes almost a third of the magazine would just be one program that you would write line by line. You would just copy it into your computer to get it to do whatever you wanted to do. So that was how I learned how to program, was first by reading and copying the code, program code from the magazines, and then eventually I learned how to modify that and get it to do what I wanted to do. um Back in those days. Yeah, so that's, going way, way back into the beginning of computers. That was where I first started. When I got to high school, though, I didn't want to go into computers. I mean, we didn't have computers in school until I got into middle school. My middle school had a computer lab, and those were Apple computers. We got to learn how to make games and stuff on that, but programming in school was still kind of a really new thing back then. When I was in high school, I really wanted to be an astronaut. Actually, that was my big goal. I wanted to be an astronaut. I wanted to fly the space shuttle, which was brand new back then as well.
Wow.
And so I actually became a pilot because I wanted to fly the space shuttle.
You became a pilot?
I am a
How
pilot.
come
I
I
have a
didn't know
commercial
that?
pilot's license.
Are
Yes.
you kidding?
Like
Wow.
I said, it's an unusual story. So after high school, I went to college. I got a degree in aviation technology. I do have a commercial pilot's license. I was fully set on going into aviation and then becoming a space shuttle pilot. That was my big goal in life. But what I discovered back then was that girls aren't supposed to fly airplanes. That was what I learned. There was a lot of gender discrimination back then. Unfortunately, it was really hard for women to break into a traditionally male dominated career like aviation. And timing is really bad because the Gulf War had just ended, the Cold War had just ended, and there were all these male pilots getting out of the military that were kind of
Oh,
saturating the workforce. And I just couldn't get a job as a pilot as a woman and with very little experience. So I was kind of stuck. So I went back to school and I changed my degree to business because, it just seemed like a useful degree to have. So I went through college again, got a degree in business, went on for a master's degree in business, did some stuff working in business, which is really interesting, but I kind of ended up moving into education, working for different universities, and eventually looking at policy and how universities support underrepresented students in learning. So that was how I got from tech to over to education by way of business.
was
Um,
education for you something that you had been thinking for a long time, or was it more accidental in a way to get into education?
it really wasn't because when I couldn't get that job in aviation that I wanted,
Uh-huh.
and I was looking for something else, my grandfather had always told me that I could always have a job if I had a degree in education or a degree in business. And
Mm.
I did not want to teach. I didn't want anything to do with teaching or education. It just sounded awful to me back then. So I did business because that was the only other choice. Now here I am and I'm in education and I love education and I really love teaching. So it's really funny how I went into business
Interesting.
to avoid education,
Yeah.
but I ended up in education anyway.
Now let's actually do a quick pause because we have CIEBAISF who wants to be a Nucamp instructor. So just shout out, apply online. We have plenty of opportunities. You can find them on LinkedIn, or I think if you type in Nucamp instructor, you can find us, or nucamp.co/jobs, and apply to that. And typically, we have more opportunities for later courses, the more complicated courses versus the first ones. But let's get back to you. Krissa, and Kenny says it came full circle, came back full circle. Yes, indeed. So you
So
joined university with a very strong sense of mission, in really trying to help underrepresented communities. So yeah, how did you what did you accomplish in that space, and how did that kind of drive take you to the next phase in your journey?
sure. So since I went back to college myself, I was already familiar with the struggles of non-traditional students. They say non-traditional. I was married with kids. I had family that I needed to worry about, and also college. So I really got it. It's different for an older adult to go back to school than it
Mhm.
is for an 18-year-old straight out of high school. So that was where I started when I got into university administration, was looking at older adult working professional students. From there, I started working with the military veteran community, which was really interesting. It was kind of a happenstance that I ended up working with that community, but it was really rewarding and fulfilling to me to feel like here's a population of students that work really, really hard, and they have all these great benefits that are promised to them from the government, but delivering on those benefits doesn't really work out the way that it should. At least it didn't seem
Mhm.
like it, because universities weren't really set up to support military students in an ideal way. So that kind of became my focus for about 12 years or so, was really focusing on how to help military veterans and active duty military and their dependents really be successful in college. And I became a policy advisor for the University of California system. I gave testimony to Congress in Washington D.C. I did a lot of work in that space about how to support these students specifically, and what universities can do to really help students be more effective students. I shouldn't say that. Really, what universities can do to get the barriers out of the way so students can do what they're already good at doing.
Yeah,
That's a better explanation. So that was kind of my work that I was doing in the university space, is to figure out how to help students be successful, really.
that's pretty cool. Were you a kind of student coach, or were you really working directly with students individually, or was it more from a programmatic standpoint and kind of rules and regulations? You said.
Yeah, a little bit of both. Originally, I was working directly with students to help them get their benefits, their GI Bill funds that they were supposed to be getting. So I did that for a while, and then from there, I kind of went into more of an administrative space to see what can universities do to support students better. Um, how do we look at success for non-traditional students? What other communities of students are not being supported fully, and how can we, expand our services as a university? So kind of branched out from there.
That's great. I'm looking at the chat right now. Um, okay, someone. Okay, thanks. I'll forward the email. Um,
Lots of side chats
I'll
going
put
on
you-
there.
all right.
Yeah, and
You
that
want to
actually,
talk about that? You want to talk about, some people have wonder if having a degree is going to be a problem, or having a good GED is going to be a problem.
yeah, and really that depends on what you want to do. So my challenge was always that I could never decide what I wanted to do when I grow up. So I just kind of went with the flow of whatever opportunities came my way. And I'm grateful for that, because they've been great opportunities, but I probably could have planned better if I put some effort into it. For me, I had a master's degree. I was working in administration. I had a very fulfilling job. I was really making a difference for thousands of students. But that kind of work doesn't pay very well. So I got to this point where I had to decide if I wanted to continue on the path of university administration, or if I wanted to explore something else that I really wanted to do when I grew up, I guess. And a lot of the students that I was working with were going into engineering fields. They were getting great job offers right out of college. They were making a lot more money than I was making with all my experience. And I was a little jealous of that. So I started thinking about maybe getting back into coding. It was something I did when I was a little kid. My husband encouraged me. He says, "You're good with computers. You should do something with
Yeah.
computers." And I'm like, I don't even know what careers are out there. So I started on that path, like, the path that's Marcus brought up in the chats here, about I could learn this myself. There's plenty of self-study resources out there.
Yeah.
You could totally learn to be a developer all by yourself, but it's kind of the slow road to success. And I didn't have time for that. I'm already mid-career. I'm paying bills here. I can't quit my job and whatever. So it was hard to figure out how to make that transition into tech. So a boot camp really became the good solution, but Nucamp didn't exist back then. So I had to go the expensive route and pay for a really expensive boot camp.
Were you
Uh,
in person? Because I remember when we started, there was one boot camp in Honolulu, I think. Is that the one that you took at the time? I think they closed since, but was it in person in Hawaii?
so we were actually living in California then. I was in San
Oh,
Diego.
there you go.
And I did a boot camp through UC San Diego's extension program. It was good. It was expensive. And, when you're making a career change and you're putting that much money on the line and you don't even know what you're getting into or if you're going to even like it, that's
Yeah.
really scary. It's a
Big
big
jump.
risk.
Yeah.
You're going to put everything on pause for 7 months and you're going to invest this time and money and hope it's all going to work out. That's the challenge that I think a lot of bootcamp students face, which is really why I love Nucamp's model, because it takes away some of that risk, right?
Mm-hmm. It's funny you mentioned that you were really more than exposed to coding in the early days, and then you pretty much skipped that. Even though you liked it at the time, you went a completely different direction.
Yeah.
I think I remember at least 2 or 3 people that I had on the show that told me the same thing. Like they went on into an education path they didn't necessarily like, and then they remembered at some point that one class that they had in high school that was about coding. It was like I think I liked it at the time, and then they went back to it and were successful. But it's funny how people are actually really exposed to coding. Many people are exposed to coding in their education journey, and then for some reason decide to not follow that path to
Mm-hmm.
then afterwards go back to it. So yeah,
Yeah, for
it's
sure.
interesting.
I mean, I had
Um,
dabbled a little bit with HTML and websites in the early, in the 90s, the early days of websites and stuff, but I had never thought about having a career as a developer until much later. So, for those of you in the chat that are early in your journey, kudos to you for figuring it out
yeah.
sooner than I did. It took me a long time.
Mel is sharing with us that he had a degree in kinesiology for 5 years, and then now in IT.
Mhm.
So, so you were working at the university, and you were making a difference with really helping people pretty much set themselves up for success by having the right financial aid, the right programs. What? So, and you said the pay wasn't exactly necessarily there, but how did you? Well, how did you go? What happened to you after the boot camp? I guess, like, how did you get that first position after the boot camp? And I know there's an interesting twist here, so I'll let you tell us.
Yeah. So, in San Diego, the big tech jobs in San Diego are at Intuit and PlayStation. Those are the biggest two,
Oh yeah.
and a lot of biotech firms and, companies like that. But the big players are Intuit and PlayStation. So a lot of people that were, talking about developers were trying to go that route. So I thought that if I wanted to have a job in tech, that I needed to apply to those tech companies. It makes sense, I guess. I didn't know
Well, I
anything
guess
else.
you can't go wrong with any of those two.
So I started applying to that, sent out applications to those companies and Google and other tech companies, and I don't know about other beginning developers, but you send a whole bunch of applications out into the void and you don't hear anything. And it's
Mhm.
like, gee, I don't know if I'm ever going to get a job by these companies, because I was thinking that tech companies were the only option.
Yeah.
The FANG companies,
Mhm.
and that was really hard to figure out how would I, and then imposter syndrome creeps in, right? How would I, as a mid-career woman, even make it in these tech companies where I thought, they're all going to be 20-year-old men? I thought this was going to be really hard. Um, what I learned though, and how this opportunity came up, my husband was actually looking for a different job, and he came across a job description with Kamehameha schools here in Hawaii. Now, we were living in California,
Yeah.
but we already have a connection with Kamehameha Schools. It's a big organization here in Hawaii. He came across a job for an engineer, a solutions engineer, they called it. And, he calls out to me, I'm making dinner or something. He's like, hey, honey, what about this job? Is this the kind of job that you do? And he doesn't even, he still didn't know what it was I actually do after what's a web
You
developer. So
understood enough to recognize the headlines of the job
yeah,
title.
so he really he was curious, is this the kind
Yeah.
of job you're looking for, really? So he shows me this job description. I looked at it and I said, well, yeah, I guess that works, but I never thought about a job in education as a developer. I was only looking at tech jobs. So I said, well, sure, I guess I should apply. When is it close? Oh, in like 1 hour. Okay, well, I'll throw an application together and send it off and see what happens. I honestly didn't expect much to come out of it, but what I learned in that process, they hired me. I was really grateful for the job. They were actually really grateful that I applied because they were hoping to find someone that already had experience in education.
Yeah.
They figured they could teach me the technical skills. They just wanted someone with this rounded experience that I had. And that was a huge eye opener to me because I thought I had to put my old career on the shelf and come up with this brand new career with these brand new skills. So for all the folks in the call, that's really the biggest thing I can share with you is that when you're changing careers, you are bringing all of your old career plus your new skills onto the table. And that is so powerful.
No, that's huge. And I was like, maybe you could also think about Boeing, SpaceX, all those, aeronautics industries. That would have been a nice one as well. So tell us a bit. So you were in California at the time, and the job was in Hawaii. So that was probably a big decision for you to think about, going back to Hawaii. You want to walk us through that, and as you describe your trip back to Hawaii, tell us a little bit about Kamehameha schools and what they do.
Sure. And yeah, we were in California. We had always been planning to move back home. Hawaii is home for us. We just weren't done with California yet. There was a lot of California stuff we still wanted to do. So when this came up, we were like, gee, should we move or should we stay? That was hard. And this was pre-COVID, going back a few years ago. So working remote wasn't an option back then. So we would have to move our whole family, which means, uprooting the kids from school and moving everybody back to Hawaii and trying to get settled in again. So it was a tough choice, but I'm really glad that I did that because this new opportunity was going to be something that I could combine my experience in education and my new skills in technology with this whole other part of me, which is being a Native Hawaiian person, wanting to help contribute to our nation, to my nation of people, and the issues that my people face with education and language normalization and culture-based learning and things like that. So that really was what this opportunity was. Now, Kamehameha Schools is a large private school system, really. It was founded by our late Princess Bernice Pawahi Bishop. She was the last heir to the Kamehameha Kingdom, and so she inherited a large amount of land. Her inheritance was about 9% of the total land of all of the archipelago. So she inherited a lot of wealth. She didn't have any children, and she actually turned down the opportunity to rule because she felt that her place as a leader, as a ruler, was to support Hawaii's people through education. Hawaiian people were dying off. The politics were changing. There were a lot of new issues that were facing her people. And she believed that education was going to be the only path forward for her people to get hope and to learn the skills that they're going to need to thrive in the new world, so to speak.
Which era was that in history? Which years would
This
you
was
say?
just the late 1800s, mid to late 1800s. So not too long ago, but significant period of change for Hawaii.
Yeah.
So she left all of her estate to the founding of this school. And today, that school system, Kamehameha Schools, has everything from preschool through high school and post high school, and internships and professional opportunities for adults. So it's really looking at education for all of Hawaii's people,
That's
really,
great.
all
Yeah.
of Native Hawaiians. So in that focus, that whole big picture, my work that I was doing, I joined a small developer team, and my work there was to create apps that supported teachers in language normalization and culture-based curriculum. So there's not a lot of curricular materials that are available in our language, and a lot of teachers have to build it from scratch. So we created basically a platform for teachers to share those resources with other teachers.
That's pretty cool.
Um, I was a brand new developer. I learned React in my boot camp. My new job required Angular, so I had to learn Angular. And I didn't really know what I was doing. So the most important thing that I had to do to kind of figure that out was get involved with my local tech community, which we'll talk about in just a minute, and start teaching other people what I did know, which I did by joining Nucamp as an instructor. Because since I came from education, I really felt like I needed to be able to teach people what I knew about JavaScript and HTML and React so that I could learn those skills better and improve my own teaching. Plus, my own boot camp, as much as it was great, and my instructor was a developer and he knew a lot about coding, he wasn't really a teacher. So
Yeah.
I felt like I could do a better job as a teacher and an educator. And I really wanted to help contribute that to Nucamp by bringing in that educational background to help grow the Nucamp community. So that's how I got involved with Nucamp 3 years ago.
That's brilliant. Let me actually show Kamehameha School's website here, keysbe.edu, if you're interested in learning more about them. Very strong social mission for every native Hawaiian out there. So if you're interested, if you're in that community, actually check them out. So yeah, we've had the pleasure to have you with us as an instructor first, and then leading the curriculum efforts at Nucamp. We won't talk too much about this, but what I want to go over with you is really what you described, which is about you had that position, very junior in it, and really that feeling that you needed to connect with the rest of the tech world, and engage with them and contribute to them. But start with the beginning. I mean, you joined Nucamp as an instructor, but tell us what you did as well with Google, what you're doing still with them, and what that really did for you, and I don't know, your career, your self-confidence, your network. What was the
Yeah,
effect of that?
absolutely.
Oh,
And
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 before, just say
oh, sorry.
hi. Thank you, Mark, for joining. I guess you're probably not with us anymore, but thanks for
Bye.
joining anyways. All right, go for it.
So before I found that job, I just finished this boot camp. I was in that little window, and it was just a few months where I was in this window where I'm trying to figure out now what. I finished a
Mhm.
boot camp, but now what? How am I ever going to get a job? I don't know anything, uh, about coding yet. So I actually got involved with a couple of tech communities there in San Diego. The first one I joined was Women Who Code San Diego, and that was a
Cool.
phenomenal organization. So
Was it
uh,
during your boot camp?
this was right after
Right
I
after.
finished my boot
Gotcha.
camp.
Yeah.
And Women Who Code San Diego was actually brand new, so they did their big launch party to, you know, uh, as a brand new organization. They actually launched it at the PlayStation Arena in
Oh,
San Diego,
nice.
which is really cool. So, here I am. I'm a brand new developer, and I'm going to this big event at a big tech company with lots of cool swag. And I'm like, wow, this is really cool. How do I get a job doing this? This is really neat. So that was, and again, this is right after I graduated. So I felt like I didn't know anything yet really to get a job, but suddenly being in this space where I'm surrounded by all of these other developers and a lot of student developers, recent
Mhm.
graduates, like me, in this big tech space, feeling like this is cool. I do belong here. It was very affirming to be in
Yeah.
this space where I felt like this is really cool. Um, right after that, the Women Who Code organization that I was part of launched a hackathon for International Women's Day, which we just had last month. And that hackathon, okay, I want to talk about hackathons just a minute.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, for anybody who is it doesn't matter where you are in your learning journey. If you're a beginning developer, if you're a student, if you're more advanced, hackathons are really cool spaces to just jump in and connect with the local community and feel like you actually know what you're doing. It really helps you with that imposter syndrome. And I want to explain that because before I did a hackathon, I was thinking, this is going to be really scary. What am I going to do? I'm not a
Mhm.
real developer yet. That's what I thought. So I went to this hackathon. It was for International Women's Day. So there were a lot of women there, men too, but mostly women, which was really exciting. And what I learned is that most people who go to hackathons are usually students and beginning developers because
Yeah.
professional developers are too busy. So the people that don't have jobs yet, those are the ones that go to hackathons. So everybody there was a beginner. And I was among people that had similar skills to mine, and
Mhm.
it was totally fine. It was okay, and it was great. And the one I did, it was a 1 day hackathon. So we started early in the morning. They kind of introduced the goal of the hackathon, which was to create an app that supports women in San Diego. That was the goal. And we kind of did some round robin stuff where we threw out ideas. We kind of did some, it's almost like speed dating because you got to find a group that you can
Yeah.
get along with really quick and put a group together and come up with an idea and start hacking out a project. And you've got a few hours to do that. And at the end of the day, you present your project, and there's a panel of judges, and hopefully you win some prizes. So that's basically how a hackathon works.
Do you
Uh,
remember the project you were working on?
yeah, my team created an app that was going to help people, if they donated their old clothes, professional clothing. It was
Mhm.
going to connect women who needed clothes for a job interview or for work with the clothes that people were
Oh, nice.
donating. So it was this virtual clothing exchange for professional clothes for women.
Ah, that's pretty cool.
We called it Dress Her, and we actually won first place in the
Oh,
hackathon, which was
nice.
really cool.
The title is awesome.
But most importantly was being in this environment where I could feel like, yeah, I can do something. I made a modal. That was my big contribution, was one modal. And now I look back on that and I'm like, gee, a modal, that was all I did. Back then that was a big deal. I created a modal, and it was really great. It opened and it closed just like a modal's supposed to do.
Well, I mean, what you're saying is super important, right? Because you talked about imposter syndrome, and what you just shared with us is going out there, joining that hackathon was a huge confidence boost,
Oh,
right? You're
absolutely.
seeing people that have the same skills that you do. You see that you're not alone. You're dazzled by PlayStation and everything, and it's a big confidence boost.
It really is. And it was really great to be in a space with other people who were very encouraging and motivating. And there were a lot of mentors there who were professional developers in the community. And whenever I got stuck with my modal, my code, I could always say, hey, how do I bring in, the database to my modal? How do I do this? And it was really a great experience. So I totally recommend hackathons. In-person hackathons are the most fun, and there's a lot of them. There's also online hackathons, but I just don't think they have that same vibe as an in-person
Yeah,
hackathon.
no, totally.
So
So, quick shout out to Krista. She really wants to schedule a hackathon for anyone at Nucamp. So, Krista, I don't know if you're hearing us right now. There you go. It's announced. Krista is gonna do something in this space and really organize something for the community. It will be a hackathon as well. Uh,
that's going to be awesome.
so that was your first foray into joining a local tech
Mhm.
community. You didn't stop there. You want to tell us about the other communities that you joined, and how did you get into those?
Yeah, so after we moved I landed that job with Kamehameha Schools, and we moved our whole family here to Hawaii. Got settled in there. The next thing I wanted to do was connect with the tech community here in Hawaii
Mhm.
because San Diego was great. I wanted to connect with the community here. Unfortunately, Hawaii's tech community is not, it wasn't fully developed. It still isn't that well developed. And about that time, I learned about Google's Women Tech Makers program, which is a really great initiative to support gender diversity in tech. And that was meaningful to me, especially because I had faced gender diversity in aviation, as we talked about. So for me, I was like, yes, this is what I want to do. I want to be a Women Tech Makers ambassador so that I can help make this change so that women can have more resources, women can feel more empowered, women can feel like they belong, in tech. So I wanted to be an ambassador for the Women Tech Makers program. But there was no associated Google developers program here in Hawaii at the time. In order to be an ambassador back then, you had to join a Google developers group. There wasn't a Google developers group, so that meant I had to create a Google developers group. So let me talk about
Doesn't
that.
exist. Don't worry, I'll create it for you.
I know. I'm sure I can do that. I got plenty of time, right?
So that's what
Google
you're
develop.
talking about, right? The Google developer
Yes.
groups.
And those Google developer groups are awesome. And I actually recommend this to everyone, every beginning developer, whether you like Google or not, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Google developer groups are all over the world. There's 1,000 chapters, like it says. There's more than that. Almost every major city has at least one Google developer group. There's actually 3 in the Seattle area. I just learned yesterday.
Really? Really? Nice.
And really, Google developer groups are professional networking groups. They do focus on Google technology, but not only Google. So they talk about a lot of other things too. What makes those a great networking opportunity is that oftentimes the speakers at events that are hosted by Google developer groups, they're actually Google speakers. They're Googlers that work in developer relations or in different aspects of the tech stack. So, if you wanted to learn Angular, for example, I'm an Angular developer, and you went to a workshop on Angular, you might actually have some of the Googlers that build Angular that are talking about that workshop and about how you can use different features of Angular or whatever. So it's a really great opportunity to have some one-on-one time, maybe not one-on-one, to have some focused time with the actual Googlers that are making the Google products that we work with. And that's really cool, whether it's cloud or IoT or Flutter or machine learning or any of those things. Those are all supported through the Google community. So once you go to those kinds of events, and this goes for all tech events, once you go to a tech event, it's really important, of course, to to network with the other people that are there, but you also want to network with the speakers that are coming out and supporting those events. Because as you network with those speakers, now you're starting to actually build connections in the tech community among, well-networked developers. So when you're brand new, in my LinkedIn page, I might have 2 or 3 other student developers, and that's not too impressive to a recruiter. But you start going to these events and you start having 20 or 30 people, including some Googlers that are connected to you in LinkedIn. Now you're going to start getting the attention of those tech recruiters that you're trying to get to know.
This is so important. I mean, it's not just about showing up, right, and being able to say I was there. It's really about networking, and I think you're very smart what you're saying. Network with the speaker, right? Make yourself known, not just only to the attendees, event organizers, speakers. Yeah, it's very. But so I need to ask you, because you made it sound super easy. Like, oh, there was not a Google developer group, so I just created one. How do you go about doing that? Like Google is huge, right? It's really huge. And you're in Hawaii and you want to create a Google developer group. Do you just send an email in in an alias that's on a website, and they reply to you and they say go ahead? Can you walk us through kind of step by step? Like if I want to create a fourth developer group in Seattle, like how would I do that?
Yeah, so I I'm sure for me, there was an application process.
Yeah.
It might have changed in the few years since then, but on that Google Developer Group website that you were just showing, there's probably a link on there where it says, start a Google Developer Group in your community, lead a chapter
Oh,
right at
look,
the very
read a
top.
chapter. There you go.
So, yeah, this will take you through the application process.
Yeah.
So, it is a bit of a process. Obviously, Google wants to make sure that whoever wants to start a chapter has some experience leading events and
Yeah.
organizing communities and kind of know what they're doing. Of course, you'll get a lot of support from Google, but a Google developer group is really the initiative of the community. So
Mhm.
it's whatever the community needs. It's not what Google wants to provide. So you need to kind of have some experience creating things for your community. And more importantly, you need to be connected enough to know what your community needs and wants. And really, I think this is another really important thing about you're connecting with your local tech, blah, 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 blah. Your local tech community is that your local community knows what your community needs. That's the
Yeah.
point I'm trying to get to here.
Yeah.
All of these online resources are great and online communities are great, but when you get down to it, what does your community need? And how can you make a difference in your community? How can you contribute to your community? How can you solve the issues in your community, whether it's homelessness or housing or affordability or food security or any of those issues? What can any of us do to help make the world a better place?
This
It
is
has to
great.
start in your local
Yeah.
community.
Is there a city that is too small to host a Google group community? Like, I'm thinking, like, why shouldn't every graduate look into their local communities, their local Google community, and if there isn't one, create it, just
Absolutely.
like you did.
Yeah, there's no reason why you shouldn't, because you know your community better than anybody else. And if it's something that you need, then it's something that people like you are going to need also.
That's right.
It might mean that you have to be a pioneer in the tech space in your community, but that's a good thing.
It's a great thing. I mean, when you think about you're fresh, out of the coding bootcamp, you're seeking experience, you're seeking, a boost of confidence. You can make it for yourself. You can just create it, and as you said, I think you actually can surround yourself with people like you that are also just starting, and that feels good at first.
Yeah.
So you do you know how long did it take? How long did it take you to from the moment you applied to create the community and the moment you actually had the community running?
So I applied in February of 2020,
Yeah.
and it was a quick process. I think it was maybe 2 or 3 weeks,
Oh wow.
to go through the application, do the interviews, and to get accepted into the program, go through the get started stuff. I was actually lucky because I joined just in time to get invited to a Google event for new GDG organizers, like their big onboarding program.
Yeah,
And
because February 2020, that's like a month before
it,
everything went.
yes,
Yeah. Okay.
that's the thing, was because I went to this event. It was actually back in San Diego. They invited all of the new GDG organizers from the past year. All got to go to this Google. It was a Google office building in San Diego, and participate in this 2-day training on how to be a GDG leader for your
Yeah.
community, how to organize events, how to get sponsors, how to find topics and speakers, all those kinds of things. And so I finished that, and I was really motivated to start doing all these great events for my community. And then the lockdown
Yeah.
happened
Everything shut down.
and
Jeez.
everything changed.
Yeah.
So it's definitely been an interesting journey because, I had ideas back in early 2020. Everything changed. We went through a pandemic and started doing these online events and getting connected to an online community. Now, a couple of years later, people are doing these hybrid events and
Mhm.
in-person things, and just trying to figure out what the new normal is going
Yeah.
forward. Right?
So yeah, I mean, boy, I imagine. Did they just shut down? Like you were all leaving the room after the training, and they were just shutting everything down right after that? That was
No,
kind
it's
of
a
weird.
couple of weeks, but it
Yeah, a
wasn't
couple of weeks. Yeah. Did you wonder at the time, or like maybe did I get it? Like, did you feel sick or something? I mean, that was really at the cusp of everything shutting down.
yeah, it
Yeah.
was it
Yeah.
was right there at the beginning. Yeah.
So but that's the Google Developer Group. Can you share with us how you got involved with the women tech makers? So which one came first?
So I applied for them both at the same time because I really wanted to be an ambassador, but
Yeah,
I needed the group too. So I
yeah,
did them both at the same time, launched them both at the same time. Um, and if anyone is on this call that's from here in Hawaii that's interested in joining my group, I would love to hand the reins of the Google Developer Group over to you
yeah.
so I can just focus on the women tech makers stuff because it's really, I wear two different hats. Well, I wear a lot more hats than
Yeah.
that, but just trying to organize those two groups because the focus of the groups are different, right? Google Developer Groups really focuses on meetups and events to help support the local developer community,
Mhm.
introduce people to new tech, and help people through developer certifications and just help people level up their skills as developers. So that's kind of the focus for a lot of the Google Developer Groups. And of course, every group has their own flavor, but
Mhm.
that's kind of the general thing. Women Tech Makers, on the other hand, does a lot more mentoring, a lot more public speaking, a lot more normalizing of women in tech spaces than just hosting events.
Yeah.
Women developers or women tech makers ambassadors usually host a big event for International Women's Day or Women's Month. But other than that, a lot of it is really on speaking and supporting the larger tech communities as a woman in tech and representing that space.
And we've worked with that organization. We've been fortunate enough to actually receive funding for the scholarship that we have with
Yeah,
Google. So we know. I mean, I know myself a little bit about the program now, enough to really understand that there's really two levels, right? You can be a member of Women Tech Makers, and you will be invited to those events. You'll participate, but then the position you have is to be an ambassador, and I think you really that's when you lead a group, right? That's when you
yeah,
organize everything.
yeah. And
So
the
don't.
application window for ambassadors is actually open right now.
Oh,
So
there you go.
if there's any women that are interested in being a community leader, of being a Women Tech Makers ambassador, this is the time to apply. The deadline, you can see here, it
Yeah,
closes on June 30th. But as an ambassador, you get a lot of support from the Google community. You get to go to Google events. Women Tech Makers invited me and hundreds of other women to go to Google I/O, which is happening
that's right.
next month in May. So we're really excited about that.
May 10th.
Um, the Tech Equity Collective is another Google group for Black developers, and that one is also going to be represented at Google I/O. So,
One
uh,
quick question for this application. Do you have to be a member to apply to become an ambassador, or is that not related?
you might have to, but joining Women Tech Makers, you just click and you join.
Yeah,
It's
okay.
there's no application process.
Yeah.
There
And so
is an
you are
application as an ambassador.
great. You are just talking about the Tech Equity Collective.
Hmm.
And maybe before you kind of talk about this initiative as well, these
Yeah,
are really key steps, right? We just outlined for anyone out there who's looking for a job, finishing up a coding bootcamp, joining a local tech community is I think for me, it became the number one strategy to find a job.
absolutely.
Really being involved. We talk a lot about networking, and people ask, what does that mean? Like, what does networking mean? Well, there you go. You have two great examples, actually three with this one. Become a member, join a Google group developer, create one if there's not one already in your city, right? So
Hmm.
very, very practical things that people can do.
Yeah. And
Um,
then get involved. You can't just join a group and
yeah,
then never show up. I mean,
that's right.
you need to and I should say this because someone in our community Discord yesterday said that she was looking for a Google developer group to join, and she found too many. She found 300 tech, not Google, but tech
Yeah,
meetups in general in her city. So how do you narrow it down was her original question. And I think that's a great question because some cities have so many resources that it might be hard for a beginner to show up. And you might make a mistake like I did early on and just joining a whole bunch of them. I
yeah.
think I initially signed up for like 20 meetups or something. And then, my inbox got spammed and I just kind of was like, wow, that's just too much.
Mhm.
So you need to kind of focus. You'll have to do a little bit of homework and focus on a tech group that speaks to something that you're interested in your community. You might not have one, you might have to start one. But if you're in a community where there's a lot of tech meetups, look for something that's meaningful to you, whether it's community based, like the Black community, the Native community, the Latinx community, the women community, whatever that is. If that's meaningful to you, then do that. Or maybe it's focused on a specific tech, like Angular meetups or JavaScript meetups or iOS developing meetups or whatever.
So it's
Or
not
maybe
necessarily the biggest one. It's not necessarily the one that's the closest to you. It's really the one that you feel you can contribute to and kind of be noticed. At the end of the day,
yeah.
you're really doing that to build a network, be noticed. So make it meaningful.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, that probably will fail.
Sure. Code for America is another good example where
Yeah.
they do projects that help to create apps for, civic solutions or whatever. So whatever speaks to you, that's what you should join. And then you need to actually go to the
Yeah.
events. And you need to go a few times because you need to go enough times that you can make friends and people know
Mhm.
who you are and people can start referring you to other people in the network. And this is really where that skill of networking and collaborating with other people becomes so important because you're building your network by interacting with other people and contributing to that space. And once you start doing that, then you can start getting connections to people beyond the network. When I was first starting out, I didn't know if I would ever be able to get noticed by recruiters or anything, but once I started networking and going to Google events and I started getting all these Googlers in my connections, now I get dozens of requests from recruiters every day, even though I'm not looking for work. It's easy to get noticed by recruiters once you start networking with other people.
I mean, I'll share my story that's really connected to yours. Uh, we so you joined Nucamp as an instructor, but you didn't just do that. I don't know how. I mean, you were the one who pinged me way back when to say, "Hey, Ludo, you guys don't have a woman community in Nucamp. Like, what's up with that? What do you think?" And it was kind of obvious that, yeah, of course, why we should have one. And so you kind of sponsored that group. And then you've always showed up as being engaged, as having a point of view. And when we had that position open of director of curriculum, we had our short list, and you were on it, even though you never right, you never really applied or anything. But that's
No.
the power. And I think, to your point, it's not just about joining communities; it's about showing up and, I mean, just picking up. Like, you have a point of view, share it. You're interested in doing something, say it. And you will be surprised how many other folks and how many people you touch that are going to just remember you because of the level of engagement. And I think I had a conversation last week. Was it last week or 2 weeks ago? I think, anyways, 2 weeks ago. Someone who was very good at that, apparently, that really was great at networking and engaging with people. And I asked her, I said, "Hey, don't you think it's a bit unfair for all the people like us that are introverts? Like, it sounds all great, but boy, you ask me to be, to speak out loud and engage and show myself. I'd rather, be in a corner and not do anything and just listen." How do you feel about that? Like, what would you say to someone that naturally is not really looking forward to speaking out and not really looking forward to sharing and engaging like that? What are any tactics or any thoughts from you on this one?
I'm glad you asked me that because I am actually very introverted. If if you looked at my Myers-Briggs scale, that introvert score is far over there. I am so introverted. It's really difficult. So I
That's
really
exactly what the lady, what my guest told
yeah.
me like 2 weeks ago. That was huge. Yeah,
And a lot of people are surprised because I
yeah.
do put myself out there and I do a lot of events and I do a lot of public speaking. Whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, it's where your energy comes from.
Hmm.
So my energy comes from being alone and from being with my close circle of family and friends. When I'm out there in public, it really wears me out. So I do it because it's what my community needs. It's what I in a way I enjoy doing it. Actually come from a theater background too, because my dad's business was in theater. So being on stage, doing a
Yeah.
performance, when I'm speaking to a group, it's acting, it's putting on that stage persona. And then when it's over, it's like time for a nap because that sucked all the energy out of me.
It's
Um,
very true.
yeah, INTJ. I see everybody putting in their comments. I'm an
Yeah.
INTJ, but it's it's uh it's not so bad. It's actually much scarier for me to pick up a phone and have a call the I don't know, call the electric company about my bill than it is for me to do public speaking. Because when I'm on stage, I'm doing a performance. But when I'm having to actually call somebody and talk to them about a problem, that's a lot harder.
I really relate to that. You're right. You're right. It's kind of the same feeling. Like you're putting on a performance, and it's enjoyable. Like it's fun.
Yeah,
Regardless
adrenaline.
where you are. So I mean, the story is even if you're an introvert, you should be able to do it.
Absolutely. It would be easier probably if I were extroverted,
Yeah,
but even introverts like me can do this.
exactly. So yeah, Kenny is sharing the same as well. So, I mean, oh, geez, we really covered that topic. There was something else that I wanted to ask you, and I don't know if we have enough time. Probably not, but let's get into that. It's you're in education. I mean, you are in the education space as well as the coding space and the development space. You are very much about opening new pathways to underserved populations and underserved communities. You and I, we've seen AI, really revolutionize how we think about education. And Bill Gates has talked about it. Sal Khan has done fantastic demo of what he's doing with Khan Academy. When you think back about the job you had at your university, when you think back at the work you were doing with at Kamehameha schools and how you were helping those teachers share their knowledge or build curriculum, how do you think of that now in the context of AI, and how would you apply AI to those situations? And then maybe if you can share with us, how you're seeing AI impacting education in the future.
Yeah, that's a really good question because from an indigenous viewpoint and and using that part of my identity, when I think about AI in general, I think about the larger issues of colonization and about technology being a colonized space.
Hmm.
And so from an indigenous perspective, it stirs up a lot of questions about data sovereignty and large language models and how indigenous languages and smaller languages are being represented in AI and in those kinds of models. What are those training biases, and whether or not that's been explored in a way that accurately reflects underserved communities. So lots of questions there, and I don't have answers to those,
Yeah,
but I hope that more people, especially underrepresented people, get involved to elevate those issues because they're big issues. And I think for everyone in the space, whatever we can do to help elevate the voices of underrepresented people is going to be what makes the difference to help decolonize AI and technology in general.
that's really interesting. There should be people passionate about, I guess, building large language models with the sole purpose of really making those models as appropriate as possible with indigenous cultures, languages. So that it's not just an English, and
Mhm.
JavaScript type of model, but I can imagine something really that's sponsored by, the Kamehameha or another organization really wanting to create the AI for Hawaiians and indigenous cultures, for example. Do you think that could that be a path to solving the challenge you've just highlighted, or?
I think the
Or maybe
challenge
would it
is,
reinforce the issue? Maybe I don't know.
well, I think the solutions need to be collective,
Yeah,
because it's a really big world, and there's so many cultures and so much richness with language and heritage and history that I don't think any one or few organizations should try to assimilate the whole world's worth of cultural heritage. I think that responsibility belongs to all of us in
hmm,
the tech space to figure out how are we representing the world.
yeah,
How are underrepresented people being heard in this space? How are their voices, their language, their cultures, their concerns being incorporated into the learning models and the
yeah.
training data and things like that? There's
I
a
mean,
lot of work we can do,
yeah, you're
but I
right.
think we all need to do it.
I mean, diversity of thoughts, diversity of perspectives, the depth of knowledge. It could all end up being a very homogeneous point of view on everything that really doesn't give space for all the nuances. Yeah, that's really interesting.
And it
Hmm.
didn't go where, there was so much more we could talk about on that, but I'm
I
glad
know
you asked
we're out of time now.
what I was
Oops.
thinking about. I
No,
know.
that's yeah. I didn't think of it this way, but it's true. It's true. All right. Well, Krissa, thank you so much, and everyone for joining us and listening to this story. I hope it was helpful to really, point out how important and strategic it is for a newcomer in tech to build a network and engage with the local tech community. Do you have one final words, Krissa, that you would like to share with the audience on this?
Um, I would say just be brave and do it. If you're not sure where you fit into your tech space, you're not going to know until you try it out. And it doesn't matter if you're a beginner or if you're further along in your journey. Everybody needs that community space. No matter how introverted you think you are, you still need to be connected to your community. So jump in, join it. If you're further along your path, then figure out how you can contribute some of your expertise. If you're just starting out, it's a safe space to get started. I would love it if the people in the chat can just drop in their favorite meetup groups or something that they've already joined if
Great
they
idea.
have. But yeah, just it's not going to hurt. Jump in, try it out. You're only going to benefit from getting connected to your community.
All right. Well, on this, thank you so much again, Krissa. It's always a pleasure having a chat, and we have many, and we'll actually have a follow up to that AI conversation. It's
Yeah,
really
we'll have to
amazing.
do a part two.
Yeah, that's right. All right, everyone, have a great weekend. Krissa, stay on, if you don't mind, just to
Sure.
and yeah, have a great weekend, everyone. Hope to see you soon in our. Oh, someone is just posting this one. There you go. Cool. Someone from
Awesome.
Japan. All right. All right.
Thanks for
Take
joining,
care.
everybody.
See ya.